Imagine waking up to the news that the United States of America has declared bankruptcy. Sounds absurd, right? But let's entertain this hypothetical for a moment. The USA, the world's largest economy, in financial ruin. It's a scenario that seems far-fetched, yet it holds significant implications. From global markets to your own pocket, the ripple effects would be unprecedented. We're delving into the question that many would rather not ask. Now, before we dive into this further, we need to understand the concept of bankruptcy. So, what exactly is bankruptcy? It's a term we often hear but may not fully understand. Bankruptcy is a legal process where an individual or a company that cannot pay their debts can get a fresh start. It's like hitting the financial reset button. Think of it this way. Imagine you're playing a game of Monopoly, and you've made some risky investments. You've bought hotels on Boardwalk and Park Place, but your opponents keep landing on free parking. Eventually you run out of cash and can't pay your debts. In the real world, that's when bankruptcy comes into play. But how does one end up in this situation? Well, bankruptcy can be caused by many things. For individuals, it might be due to job loss, medical expenses, or simply poor financial management. For companies, it could be because of declining sales, high operational costs, or an inability to compete in the market. Now, what happens when bankruptcy is declared? Once a bankruptcy case is filed, the person or company gets an automatic stay. This means creditors must stop collection efforts. It's like a financial shield, protecting you from your debts while you work out a plan. But remember, bankruptcy isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. It has serious consequences, like a major hit to your credit score and potential loss of assets. It's a last resort, used when all other options have failed. Now that we've understood bankruptcy, let's see how it applies to a country. A country's declaring bankruptcy? Yes, it's a real thing. But how does it work exactly? Well, in the world of international finance, it's known as sovereign default. This is when a country is unable to meet its debt obligations. Sounds simple, right? But the reality is far more complex, and the consequences can be severe. Let's take a little stroll down history lane. Remember Argentina? In the early years of the 21st century, Argentina found itself unable to repay its debt, leading to the largest sovereign default in history. The country's economy was devastated and it took years to recover. Or how about Greece? Just a decade ago, the Mediterranean nation found itself in a similar predicament. As part of the Eurozone, Greece's financial troubles had far-reaching implications, leading to a European and global financial crisis. But what causes a country to default on its debts? Well, it's usually a combination of factors. This could be a severe economic downturn, poor fiscal management, political instability, or a sudden increase in borrowing costs. And what happens when a country defaults? The immediate aftermath is often a deep recession, with soaring unemployment and inflation. The country's credit rating is downgraded, making it more expensive and difficult to borrow money in the future. It's a vicious cycle, and recovery can take years if not decades. So yes, countries can and do go bankrupt. But it's not like personal bankruptcy where you can wipe the slate clean and start over. When a country defaults, it's a long, grueling process, with far-reaching consequences that can affect every aspect of society. But don't think it's all doom and gloom. Countries have bounced back from bankruptcy before, and they can do it again. It's all about learning from past mistakes and making better financial decisions in the future. Now, armed with this knowledge, let's explore the impact of a potential US bankruptcy. The USA, the world's largest economy, declaring bankruptcy. What would that look like? Imagine, if you will, a domino effect of economic repercussions cascading across the nation. The United States, a nation whose economy is worth over $21 trillion, is not immune to economic struggles. In fact, the reasons for a possible bankruptcy are manifold and complex. To begin with, the country's national debt is a ticking time bomb. The United States is the world's largest debtor nation, owing more than $28 trillion. This debt is primarily financed by issuing government bonds, which are bought by both domestic and international investors. If the US were to declare bankruptcy, it would default on these obligations, causing a massive shockwave in the financial markets. Aside from the national debt, unfunded liabilities such as Social Security, Medicare, and pensions could also push the country towards bankruptcy. These are commitments the government has made to its citizens that it must fulfill, regardless of its financial situation. Now let's talk about the consequences. A US bankruptcy would have far-reaching implications domestically. It would cause a massive decrease in the value of the US dollar, as investors would lose confidence in the government's ability to pay its debts. This could lead to hyperinflation, similar to what we've seen in countries like Zimbabwe and Venezuela, where the value of money becomes so low that it's practically worthless. The economy would also take a hit. The government, unable to pay its bills, would have to drastically cut spending, leading to job losses in the public sector. This would increase unemployment rates and decrease consumer spending, further damaging the economy. And what about the average American? Well, they would feel the pinch too. Savings could be wiped out as the value of the dollar plummets. Social Security and Medicare benefits could be slashed or even discontinued. Pensions could be lost. In other words, the financial security of millions of Americans would be in jeopardy. Moreover, the cost of living would skyrocket as the price of imported goods would increase due to a weaker dollar. Everything from your morning cup of coffee to the car you drive could become significantly more expensive. So the picture isn't pretty. A U.S. bankruptcy would be a catastrophic event, causing a significant drop in living standards, an economic downturn, and a devaluation of the dollar. It's a scenario that would affect every American from Wall Street to Main Street. But the effects of a U.S. bankruptcy wouldn't stop at the borders. Let's see how it would impact the world. A U.S. bankruptcy would send shockwaves around the globe. If this were to happen, the effects would be felt in every corner of the world, affecting global trade, financial markets, and international relations. Imagine the world's largest economy suddenly unable to pay its debts. It's like the heart of global commerce suffering a massive heart attack. The U.S. is a significant player in international trade, with many countries relying heavily on its consumer market. A U.S. bankruptcy could cause a domino effect, with global trade grinding to a halt as countries scramble to find new markets for their goods and services. Now let's talk about financial markets. The US dollar is the world's primary reserve currency used by central banks around the globe. If the US were to declare bankruptcy, confidence in the dollar would plummet, causing its value to drop dramatically. This could lead to a global financial crisis, as countries that hold large amounts of US debt would see the value of their reserves shrink overnight. The ripple effects would be felt across the globe, causing stock markets to tumble and potentially leading to a worldwide recession. But the impact of a U.S. bankruptcy wouldn't just be economic. It would also have serious implications for international relations. The U.S. plays a key role in many international institutions, such as the United Nations, NATO, and the World Bank. If the U.S. were to go bankrupt, it could lose its influence in these organizations, leading to a power vacuum and potentially destabilizing the international order. Furthermore, the U.S. provides significant amounts of foreign aid to many countries. If it were to go bankrupt, this aid could be cut off, causing severe hardship in some of the world's poorest regions. This could potentially lead to increased instability and conflict, as countries struggle to cope with the fallout. Finally, let's not forget the impact on ordinary people around the world. A global economic crisis could lead to job losses, lower living standards, and increased poverty. It's a sobering thought, but it's important to remember that the global economy is interconnected, and what happens in one country can have far-reaching effects. So while a U.S. bankruptcy seems unlikely, it's a scenario with far-reaching implications. It's a reminder of just how interconnected we all are, and how the financial health of one country can impact the entire globe. The world is a complex web of economic relationships, and a major disruption in any part of that web can send shockwaves that are felt around the world. So, there we have it. We've delved into the concept of bankruptcy, explored its implications for countries and particularly the USA. We've seen the potential global impact of a US bankruptcy, a scenario that, while highly improbable, would undoubtedly be devastating. It's been a journey into the complexities of our global economy, underscoring just how interconnected we all are. While the idea of the USA declaring bankruptcy is a daunting one, it's a fascinating thought experiment that helps us understand the interconnectedness of our global economy.